Hello, my name is Sammy Robinson, and my group members are Nicole Argiro and Shannon Urich. We are going to be talking about applied behavior analysis and school-wide positive behavior support. Are they one and the same, loosely connected, or in conflict? Some say ABA and SWPBS can be considered one and the same because SWPBS could not have come into existence without principles of ABA, especially the dimensions of ABA: behavioral, affective, technological, and generality. Shannon will be taking this side during the debate. Others say that ABA and SWPBS are in conflict because SWPBS lacks the treatment fidelity, reliability, and effectiveness that ABA strives to achieve. They could also be considered in conflict because SWPBS violates the ethical compliance codes that behavior analysts are held accountable by. Nicole will be taking this side of the debate. Now I will turn it over to Shannon for her first point.
So I am arguing that school-wide behavior support and ABA are connected. So currently, we still look at the article from Beowulf and Risley from 1968, looking at the guidelines and the dimensions that we follow. So one of the guidelines or the dimensions that they put in place and said that behavior analysts need to follow are the behavioral dimension. And this dimension is a core component of the school-wide positive behavior support plan suggested by Clark 2002. Beowulf and Risley states that behavioral dimension asks how it is possible to get an individual to do something effectively. And so we want to look at the functional assessment that comes in to see what the purpose and the motivation behind that problem behavior that is socially significant that we need to change. And that is stated by London 2012. And so how they do that is ABA, or behavior analysis, and school-wide behavior supports create a plan to change the behavior in a necessary direction. They do this by educational methods of shaping and fading and chaining and prompting that both school-wide positive behavior support and behavior analysts using applied behavior analysis use. I also want to look at Code 3.01 from the Professional and Ethical Compliance Code for Behavior Analysis. This code is the Behavior Analytic Assessment. So this code, the point B of that code, is to first conduct a functional assessment prior to the recommendations. So when we're looking at Beowulf and Risley dimensions of behavioral, and we're looking at the Code 3.01 Professional and Ethical Compliance Code, applied behavior analysis and the school-wide positive behavior support plan, they both are using the dimension of behavioral.
So I argue that SWPBS interventions cannot be considered a part of the behavioral dimension of applied behavior analysis because there is not explicit measurement of the reliability of observers. Though SWPBS practitioners conduct functional assessments prior to recommendations in alignment with the Behavior Analyst Certification Board Professional and Ethical Code 3.01, behavioral analysts are held accountable by the BACB and are required to exhibit a sophisticated approach to functional assessment and a firm grounding in operant conditioning methods and behavior change principles. According to Johnson, 2006, there is no general mechanism for academic training of professionals of SWPBS, as in the ABA model. It is likely that interventions implemented by SWPBS practitioners will not be as effective as the research literature shows it can be. Van Houten, 1988, proposed that an individual has a right to treatment by a competent behavior analyst. The behavior analyst academic training reflects thorough knowledge of behavior principles, methods of assessment and treatment, research methodology, and professional ethics. Bayer, Wolf, and Risley, 1968, proposed that applied behavior analysis should be applied, behavioral, analytic, technological, conceptually systematic, effective, and produce generalization. The analysis of a behavior requires a believable demonstration of the events that can be responsible for the occurrence or non-occurrence of that behavior. While there are some components of school-wide positive behavior supports that can align with the 7 dimensions of applied behavior analysis as described in Anderson and Kincaid 2005, in regards to treatment integrity of their interventions, it is difficult to justify SWPBS as being technological or behavioral. Anderson and Kincaid 2005 state that in the case of SWPBS, technological precision refers to the implementation fidelity in individual schools. Cooper, Heron, and Hayward 2007 describe that the development of a replicable technology of behavior change has been a defining characteristic and goal for ABA from its inception.
And so,
behavioral tactics are replicable and teachable to others, and interventions that cannot be replicated with sufficient fidelity to achieve comparable outcomes are not considered part of the technology. Bayer, Wolf, and Risley 1968 state that if humans are observing and recording the behavior under study, then any change may represent a change only in their observing and recording responses rather than the subject's behavior. Explicit measurement of reliability of human observers not only becomes merely good technique, but a prime criterion of whether the study is behavioral. Cooper, Heron, and Hayward 2007 suggest that treatment integrity refers to the extent to which the independent variable is implemented or carried out as planned. Low treatment integrity invites extraneous variables into an intervention, making it difficult, if not impossible, to determine the results with confidence. Data from an intervention or an experiment in which the independent variable is administered improperly or applied inconsistently can often lead to unreliable data. According to Anderson and Kincaid 2005, a variety of strategies are built into the SWPBS implementation procedure to enhance fidelity. These strategies include team-based leadership, at least 80% of staff approval to agree to implement the SWPBS plan, administration support, teaching faculty and staff to implement the SWPBS plan, providing scripts and cues, training opportunities, and ensuring a reinforcement system is in place for the staff. These strategies are beneficial for staff implementation of SWPBS, however, they do not demonstrate treatment integrity data. One study focused on collecting data that reflect the consistency with which classroom-based SWPBS practices are implemented. Fallon, McCarthy, and Sinetti, 2014, described that measures of the SWPBS implementation fidelity include the school-wide evaluation tool that is administered annually to assess integrity by interviews with administration, teachers, and students, the benchmarks of quality administered annually by team members and coaches in the form of a 53-item survey, implementation phases inventory administered semi-annually by coaches for 10 to 15 minutes twice a year to determine if the school is in preparation, initiation, implementation, or maintenance phase. The team implementation checklist, a progress monitoring tool completed in 10 to 15 minutes in a meeting with SWPBS, and the effective behavior support self-assessment survey, a progress monitoring tool administered annually via self-reporting by staff members for 46 items. Assessing treatment integrity is a foundational process of SWPBS, yet there is not a reliable and valid measurement in place to assess the implementation of SWPBS interventions. The tools are in place are administered once or twice a year through the use of surveys, self-reporting, and interviews. This does not yield credible or reliable data for the implementation of SWPBS interventions. Fallon, McCarthy, and Sinetti 2014 conduct a study to provide preliminary data to determine how challenging it is for teachers to implement specific SWPBS practices. A substantial minority of 31 to of respondents indicate that 4 practices are implemented only somewhat consistently in the classroom. These practices include delivering consistent consequences, continuing instruction when problem behavior occurs, and aligning classroom procedures with procedures that are in place school-wide. Due to the lack of credible and reliable treatment integrity data, the implementation of SWPBS practices, it can be suggested that SWPBS is not technological or behavioral in nature. Baer, Wolf, and Risley, 1968, stated that explicit measurement of the reliability of human observers is not only merely good technique, but a prime criterion for whether the study is behavioral.
Well, you're saying that school-wide positive behavior support does not have treatment integrity. However, SPCE 2008 suggests that when schools create 2 teams, which is the behavior team, they lead the policies of this program, and the student study team, the behavioral concerns. These teams are in charge of the inter-observer agreements that allow for treatment integrity. So with that, like you were saying, there is training for both of these teams to then apply the inter-observer agreements that behavior analysis use also. There are ways to do inter-observer agreement, and that will help treatment integrity. So Springer 2008 took the agreements on each component and multiplied it by 100% and got the raw reliability. Horner, Sugi, and Anderson 2010 also suggest that in the primary prevention, there is a high fidelity in school settings. So I want to go to my second point, which is related to my first point in ABA and school-wide positive behavior support, which relies on ABA, or applied behavior analysis, for its scientific foundation and principles. So Carr 2002 states, the experts in school-wide positive behavior support rely on behavior analysis, and these people that are leading these programs need to be highly qualified in the behavior principles and those applications, and the knowledge behind applied behavior analysis so they can lead these programs in the right direction. So we also want to look at school-wide positive behavior support plan relies on the 3-term contingency and helps find the function of the behavior. So we want to look at the antecedent, you want to look at the behavior, and then you want to look at the consequence. And both ABA and school-wide positive behavior support plans both do this, suggested by Carr 2002. We also want to look at, from the foundation point of it, procedures that are able to be replicated by the team. So in ABA, when you're doing a plan, we need to be able to replicate the plan that is in place so that we can do it again. The same thing with school-wide positive behavior support plan. There are procedures that are in place. We write down the procedures so that other professionals can replicate this plan. I also want to look at the professional and ethical compliance code for behavior analysis. I want to look at the code 6.01, affirming principles, and this is going to be under A. So when we're looking at that, we need to, ABA and behavior analysts need to advance the values, ethics, and principles of the profession. And school-wide positive behavior support is also advancing the values and the ethics using ABA. So when we're looking at the foundation of applied behavior analysis, and then directly relates to the school-wide positive behavior support plan, this just shows how these two are connected.
The Behavior Analyst Certification Board Professional and Ethical Compliance Code 1.01 states that behavior analysts rely on professionally derived knowledge based on science and behavior analysis when making scientific or professional judgments in human service provision, or when engaging in scholarly or professional endeavors. Applied behavior analysis is a science devoted to objectively defined behaviors of social significance. They intervene to improve the behaviors under study while demonstrating a functional relationship between their interventions and the behavioral improvements. ABA uses methods of scientific inquiry, objective description, quantification, and controlled experimentation. One complication in evaluating SWPBS has been described by Saylor and Paul 2004 as flexible in its engagement of scientific procedures. They also stated that where ABA has been historically wholly focused on interventions that can be evaluated with positivist methods, for example, single subject research designs, school-wide positive behavior supports increasingly is relying on multi-method investigations that sometimes include subjectivist methodologies. Johnson, 2006, states that the difficulty with the methodologies described by Saylor and Paul in 2004 is that they produce information that is especially likely to reflect personal opinions, impressions, and beliefs that are problematic because they are prone to influence by many variables that have little or nothing to do with the actual effects of the intervention under study. Evaluation of SWPBS interventions are more often descriptive than experimental and often involve the use of subjective personal information, natural observations, anecdotal reports, and indirect measures of behavior, interviews, surveys, checklists, and rating scales, much like their treatment integrity data, rather than data produced by direct, observable measurement methods. This is not to say that there is no sound studies in the SWPBS literature. However, utilizing subjective measurement of behavior and relying heavily on quasi-experimental designs, for example, A/B comparisons, makes it difficult to determine the efficacy of their interventions. A treatment in applied behavior analysis is analytic when the experimenter has demonstrated a functional relationship between the manipulated events and a reliable change in some dimension of the targeted behavior. Donald Baer, on October 21, 1982, stated through a personal communication in the Cooper, Heron, and Hayward book, 2007, because we are a data and design-based discipline, we are in the remarkable position of being able to prove that behavior can work in the way that our technology prescribes. We are not theorizing about how behavior can work. We are describing systematically how it has worked many times in real-world applications, with designs too confident and measurement systems too reliable and too valid to doubt. Our ability to prove that behavior can work that way does not, of course, establish that behavior cannot work any other way. We are not in a discipline that can deny any other approaches, only in one that can affirm itself. When evaluating the efficacy of SWPBS, it is difficult to rule out the possibility of extraneous variables or subjectivity in the data. Applied behavior analysis relies on data produced by direct and observable methods of measurement. Due to the subjectivity in their measurement methods and flexibility in their engagement with scientific procedures, SWPBS can be considered in conflict with behavior analysis. Baer, Wolf, and Risley, 1968, state that an experimenter has achieved an analysis of behavior when he can exercise control over it.
So, Nicole, when we're looking at the efficacy of school-wide positive behavior support, I want to look at Horner, Sugi, and Anderson, 2010, page 3, when it looks at the evidence that are needed. Some of the evidence that is needed is a number of studies documenting an experimental effect, methodology, quality of the studies, able to replicate the study, size of the documented effect, and durability. So I want to look at that in the three tiers of intensity of the school-wide positive behavior support. I want to say it is complex. However, the evidence for individual practices are sound and are efficient and and provide efficacy. So when I want to look again into my next point, I want to go back again to the Baer, Wolf, and Risley 1968 article that looks at some more dimensions. This time I'm going to look at the dimension of being efficacious. Carr 2002 states school-wide positive behavior support applies this dimension of being efficacious, and how it does this by looking at the socially significant behavior and making a great deal of change. Applied behavior analysis needs to be great. It needs to have a great deal of change to be considered to have efficacy and to be effective. So when we're looking at being effective, the school-wide positive behavior support's core component of the achievement stated by Tinkan in 2007 of the comparative lifestyle change and improvement of quality, it needs to make a change across the lifespan by using the behavioral principles. And that is exactly what school-wide positive behavior support plan does, and is connected to applied behavior analysis. In the school-wide positive behavior support plan, we want to identify the outcome, establish and invest in an intervention, implement evidence-based practices, and collect data to make data-based decisions. This then produces meaningful and significant change that will be lasting, and that's what we need to be efficient and last over time. So when I want to look at one of the codes, 2.09, treatment intervention efficacy. So looking at A, clients have a right to effective treatment. The research literature adapted to the individual client. So it can be adapted, and we want it to be effective for the client. So we want to say that the school-wide positive behavior support plan is also following that. Also in that, it says long-term and short-term benefits to the clients and the society. Well, when you're looking at school-wide positive behavior support plan, you have short-term benefits and you have the long-term benefits over the school years and over middle school and elementary school. So we also want to look at the provision and oversight required to meet the definition of behavior change programs. So we want to make a significant change that's going to help that individual be more successful. And school-wide positive behavior support plans also want to do that for the individual, as well as behavior analysis want to do. So both school-wide positive behavior support and ABA want to make sure that the changes being made by using behavior principles are so significant.
Because of the low treatment integrity and subjective methods of measurement, this allows for scrutiny in the data that determine whether their interventions are actually effective or not. SWPBS could be considered in conflict with the effective dimension proposed by Bayer, Wolf, and Risley, 1968, and the Professional and Ethics Code 2.09 that states that clients have the right to an effective treatment. Johnson, 2006, states that SWPBS treatment, the treatment model focuses on making changes to antecedent environment and de-emphasizes the formal complexities of consequence-based interventions. Although this shift away from consequence-based procedures and the associated research literature is likely to be appealing to those who lack training in ABA, it is at odds with basic and applied research findings. Any effort to market ABA must accommodate all aspects of the technology that are supported by sound research. The Behavior Analyst Certification Board's Professional and Ethical Compliance Code for Behavior Analyst Code 2.09 states that clients have the right to an effective treatment based on the research literature and adapted to the individual client. Behavior analysts always have the obligation to advocate for and educate the client about scientifically supported, most effective treatment procedures. Effective treatment procedures have been validated as having both long-term and short-term benefits to clients and society. Van Houten, 1988, proposed that individuals who are recipients or potential recipients of treatment designed to change their behavior have the right to the most effective treatment procedures available. Behavior analysts are consistent with the concept of the least restrictive yet effective treatment exposure of an unacceptable. So exposure to restrictive procedures is unacceptable unless you have data to show that a restrictive procedure would be effective. It is equally unacceptable to expose an individual to a non-restrictive intervention or a series of such interventions if assessment results or available research indicate that other procedures would be more effective. In some cases, a client's right to effective treatment may dictate the immediate use of quicker acting but temporarily more restrictive procedures. School-wide positive behavior support emerged from the controversy of the use of aversive consequences with people with developmental disabilities. Horner 1990 suggests that non-aversive behavior management seeks alternatives to the emphasis on behavioral suppression and relies on positive procedures to educate and promote appropriate behavior. The overall theme of school-wide positive behavior support is that the use of punishment for challenging behavior is not desirable. Horner 1990 asserted that positive behavior supports encompass the following elements: emphasis on lifestyle change, functional analysis, multi-component interventions, manipulating the ecological and setting events, antecedent manipulations, teaching adaptive behavior, building environments, consequences such as DRO, DRA, and DRI, minimizing the use of punishment, distinguishing emergency procedures from proactive programming, social validation, and preserving the dignity of recipients of their interventions. One major difference in SWPBS and ABA is the accepted use of empirically validated punishment interventions in applied behavior analysis. The Behavior Analyst Certification Professional and Ethical Code 4.8 considers the following regarding the use of punishment. Behavior analysts recommend reinforcement rather than punishment whenever possible. If punishment procedures are necessary, behavior analysts always include reinforcement procedures for alternative behavior in the behavior change program. Before implementing punishment-based procedures, behavior analysts ensure that appropriate steps have been taken to implement reinforcement-based procedures unless that appropriate step If behavior analysts ensure that aversive procedures are accompanied by an increased level of training, supervision, and oversight. Behavior analysts must evaluate the effectiveness of aversive procedures in a timely manner and modify the behavior change program if it is ineffective. Behavior analysts always include a plan to discontinue the use of aversive procedures when no longer needed. Like applied behavior analysis, SWPBS uses antecedent manipulation and reinforcement procedures. However, applied behavior analysis accepts the use of punishment interventions when they are necessary. Though there has been much controversy over the use of aversive interventions, punishment is not a bad thing. Punishment is just as important to learning as reinforcement and is one of the basic principles of operant conditioning. Punishment is defined as a stimulus change that immediately follows the occurrence of behavior and reduces the future frequency of that behavior. There are many practical applications of positive and negative punishment that are often deemed necessary as interventions for many individuals and in many different environments, including the classroom. School-wide positive behavior supports individualized treatment level include adjustments to the environment to reduce the likelihood of a problem, teaching a replacement skills, promote consequences to promote positive behaviors and deter problems, and crisis management. SWPBS seeks to avoid the use of punishment as an intervention. However, they utilize punishment as in the form of crisis management during crisis situations. Though it is noted in Horner 1990 that the use of crisis management techniques must not be allowed to turn into ongoing restraint. But it could be argued that if SWPBS accepted less restrictive punishment procedures, the need for the more restrictive crisis management techniques may not be necessary for many individuals. Anderson and Kincaid, 2005, state that research suggests that many uses of punishment, such as suspension, expulsion, are not effective in decreasing problem behavior and may, in fact, make the situation worse. And I completely agree. This statement is valid, and unfortunately many schools have adopted the get tough approach, which does not address functions of the behavior and it does not teach a functionally equivalent replacement behavior. However, neglecting to use punishment interventions is in conflict with the principles of behavior. The Behavior Analyst Certification Board Professional and Ethical Code 6.02 states that behavior analysts promote behavior analysis through public presentations, discussions, and other media. Behavior analysts should be disseminating information regarding appropriate use of punishment and the role of punishment in operant conditioning. Van Houten, 1988, asserts that it is unacceptable to expose an individual to non-restrictive intervention if assessment results and available research indicate that other procedures would be more effective. ABA and SWPBS are similar in the use of antecedent manipulation and reinforcement procedures. However, without providing punishment when it is necessary, SWPBS could be considered in conflict with applied behavior analysis. Withholding empirically validated and effective interventions from an individual does not provide that individual with the most effective treatment procedures possible.
So Nicole, when you stated behavior analysts are consistent with the concept of least restrictive yet effective treatment, exposure of an individual with restrictive procedures is unacceptable. Also, to look at an individual to non-restrictive intervention or a series of such interventions. But I want to guide you and bring your attention to the tier system that works for school-wide positive behavior support. They start with the least restrictive. However, they are able to move up the tiers very quickly and get to that restrictive environment or restrictive plan if needed. So there is room there that they're just not going to stay there at that least restrictive place if that's not what's called for. So that brings me to my last point for school-wide positive behavior support plans. And again, I want to look back into Wolf and Risley, 1968, of the applied behavior analysis dimensions that are stated. I want to say that ABA and school-wide positive behavior support plans both use generality. ABA looks for the interventions to be durable over time in multiple environments or related behaviors. CAR 2002 states a core component of the school-wide positive behavior support plan is across the lifespan of the student, of the individual. So we're looking to maintain the behavior over time, after school, after college, after work life, so that this is going to be maintained. ABA looks at once the intervention setting stops, does the behavior change still be maintained? And the school-wide positive behavior support plan says, documented in the evidence, is saying yes, the change is still consistent. School-wide positive behavior support, I want to look for this school-wide positive behavior support looking at the code 2.09 in treatment intervention effective. The long-term benefits to the clients and society. There is a long-term benefit of school-wide positive behavior support that is connected to applied behavior analysis.
Alright, so in conclusion to all of that, school-wide behavior support and ABA are connected by looking at the dimensions of behavior analysis by Bear, Wolf, and Risley. The behavioral dimension asks how to get an individual to do something. A functional assessment also is a key element that looks at the purpose and motivation behind the behavior. From that, a plan is created to change a behavior using methods such as fading, shaping, etc. Both ABA and SWPBS rely on the three-term contingency, the antecedent, behavior, and consequence contingency, to help find the function of the behavior. This is an important aspect of ABA as well as behavior analysts holding up and advancing the values, ethics, and principles of the profession of behavior analysis. The affective dimension is also an important aspect of both ABA and SWPBS. This dimension helps make meaningful changes using behavioral principles. Clients have a right to effective treatment according to the Compliance Code 2.09. The effective treatments will have long-term and short-term benefits to the client and to society. which means that they are just making sure the behavior changes will be socially significant. Lastly, SWPBS follows generality, which is also a dimension of ABA. This dimension means that behavior change will be durable over time in different environments with related behaviors. This will also allow for long-term benefits to society and the client. On the other hand, ABA and SWPBS can be in conflict due to the lack of treatment integrity, reliability, and effectiveness. It is almost impossible to determine whether or not the SWPBS intervention could be generalized to other people, environments, or stimuli. There is little to no evidence that these dimensions, behavioral, analytic, and technological, and effective and generality are core components in the implementation of SWPBS. ABA and SWPBS are in conflict in many ways, but most importantly, it does not provide individuals with the most effective treatment plan because it does not acknowledge the importance of the role of punishment in operant conditioning. By withholding empirically validated interventions, SWPBS is not providing the most effective treatment. As behavior analysis, we are held accountable by our ethical codes of conduct set forth by the board. SWPBS is in violations of codes 2.09, 4.08, 6.02, and 1.01 of the Behavior Analyst Certification Board Professional and Ethical Codes of Compliance. With that being said, SWPBS and ABA, it could either go one way or the other. They could be in conflict or they could be connected. There's just a lot of evidence for both sides and a lot of evidence we are lacking still, so there could be more research to be done for this topic. Thank you.